Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Aerosmith podcast, Get Your Wings. I'm your host, Rob Mars, and today we are here to talk about the most recent Aerosmith release here in 2025, a collaborative 5-track EP with the young artist Yungblud. This thing has about a 19-minute runtime. I would say it's easily listenable and easily replayable because of that. 4 of the tracks being brand new, the 5th track being a remix of Aerosmith's famous Back in the Saddle. Before we get into the track-by-track breakdown that I'm going to do here, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about my release day journey, what I did for all of that, because there are a lot of versions of this album. I covered it a little bit on the last episode, but just to rehash a little here, there are a couple of different vinyls. Aerosmith's website has a red one. Yungblud's website has a silver one. There's also a Walmart exclusive with a white cover as opposed to the regular black cover. There's also a limited edition release from Aerosmith where Steven spray painted some inserts for the cover of the CD. That is the one I originally ordered. I thought it was the most unique and cool for a physical, so I was awaiting the delivery of that on the release day, but it only left the factory on that day, so I knew I wasn't getting it same day. When I woke up that morning, I saw that Yungblud had recently been in Walmart and was signing their exclusive version of the EP. Now, I didn't really mind too much. Obviously, we all have access to the EP if we use streaming services such as Spotify or Tidal or Apple Music. I'm sure it is on each of those. I myself have Spotify, so there was no reason I needed to run out and buy a physical. But of course, being the fan that I am, I want to support this band, and I'm excited for this release. I listened to it on Spotify early that morning. I really was enjoying it. It exceeded my expectation of what I thought this project was going to be. So I said, hey, screw it. I'm going to go get this exclusive Walmart version. The big selling point for me, although it's something very small, it's the reason that I chose it. On the inside of the cover, once you open it up, it contains a poster of Steven, Joe, and Yungblud. This poster is from their shoot for the UK Rolling Stone cover that they did most recently. So, although I don't have that magazine, it's cool to have a piece of that photo shoot as a part of my collection. It also allowed me a chance to, while listening to the EP over quite a few times now, look at the liner notes as I was doing so. Anyhow, let's get into this EP. We're going to start, of course, with the lead single and the opening song, My Only Angel. Now, I know I covered this song a little bit on last episode when I previewed the project because it was the most prominent thing out there, the first thing they released, apparently the first thing that Steven, Joe, and Yungblud all recorded and did together that sparked the rest of these songs. So definitely a song that carries a lot of weight on this project. And let me tell you, as I've listened to it more over time, as I've listened to it within the context of the 5 tracks, I definitely do understand why it's the lead single. Not that I didn't before, because as we've mentioned, it's a catchy song with great guitars that showcases why Aerosmith lended themselves to this project. So I definitely understand it now being the lead single, but after listening to it even more, I've kind of realized a layered meaning to this song. Now, a lot of the lyrics with My Only Angel are things about letting go, about maybe losing your metaphorical quote-unquote wings as an angel. Okay, Steven says, gotta leave you far behind. Gotta leave you falling down. Okay, on a lot of these songs, let me just preface, although Steven is present and we can feel his songwriting acumen here, and he definitely lends a lot of advice to Yungblud, you can tell they collaborated. Yungblud takes the lead on a lot of these other songs. This song, Steven, is front and center, both in the choruses and in the verses. You can say what you want about the production on his voice. Yes, I get it. It is a little overglossed. I agree. It's a little overdone. I wish, especially after getting to know this song more, that it was more of his natural voice, because those parts where we do get the graveliness and the age and the waning, it lends itself to the theme of this song. Now, the reason I say it's layered meaning is because we have to remember the context here. One more time, by nature of its name and its release under Aerosmith, could very well be the last studio project we get from this band as we know it, regardless of any of the minutiae that I've spoken about as to whether the other three members appear on this project. We're going to ignore that because I've already spoken about that at length. So this potentially being their last release, this really could be Steven's swan song, a last goodbye to the fans, to the studio, to all that he's done, letting us know that reluctantly he has to give this up. He doesn't want to, but because of his age, because of the injuries and because of what he's been through, to save his voice at least a little bit, he has to take his foot off the gas pedal. Now, I want to bring it back because there's a big connection here with Aerosmith and songs about, not necessarily about wings, but lyrics including wings, obviously imagery with their logo including wings. So I just want to connect this back to My Only Angel because obviously angels have wings, angels fly. This is a sadder song of letting those things go and falling. So let's take it back to 1987. Aerosmith releases what is considered their comeback album. And it is because that's what brought them back to acclaim after, of course, as we've also spoken about, the Run DMC Walk This Way collaboration. Permanent Vacation came after an unsuccessful album, which was actually the band's first album back together after Joe Perry and Brad Whitford rejoined Aerosmith. In 1985, they released an album called Done with Mirrors, of course referencing being done with drugs, especially the likes of cocaine, hence Mirrors. That album was not received well at all, okay? Even if there are good songs on it, good compositions, and the band sounds raw and real. This next album, Permanent Vacation, was definitely the band rising back up from the ashes. The reason I mention the album is because it contains a hit single, a love song, different from My Only Angel, but entitled Angel. So I just think it's kind of a sweet nod to that. Although the content and the composition of the songs are quite different, I don't think they're the same musically. I still think it's nice that there are two singles, including Angels, and like I said, Aerosmith has a recurring theme with wings. Now, take it 2 albums further. We have Get a Grip in 1993. Aerosmith releases a song called Amazing. Within those lyrics, they chronicle their comeback, and this is the genius of Steven's lyric writing. If you're not listening closely, you might not catch this, but on the bridge of the song, he says that's one last shot, Permanent Vacation, meaning that by that album, they had their one last shot. And then he goes on to say, and how high can you fly with broken wings? This, of course, referencing Aerosmith's logo, the wings. For all 5 members, they were down and out. They weren't sure. Were they ever going to be relevant or do anything that anyone cared about in music ever again? Right before releasing Permanent Vacation. They had no clue. They were about to strike gold and become, commercially at least, bigger than they ever had been before. But they did. And here Steven is in 1993, reflecting on those broken wings being repaired after their one last shot on Permanent Vacation. Now, we fast forward to 2025. Steven is saying he has no choice. I gotta leave you falling down. So, if you think about it in this context, it's really quite poetic to me. The lyrics hit a lot more. It's more than just, soapy pop, easily absorbable lyricism. This is something that I really, really appreciate. So, beyond that, like I've mentioned, the Joe Perry contribution to this song is really great. It's beautiful guitars. As I said, Steven's voice, although there's some production on it, it still leads the way on this one. The solo, it sounds great, but I do wish Joe had an opportunity to open up a little bit more on this. It seems like, if you listen to it, there's probably more tape there that was running, and Joe continued to solo, but it seems like the producer on this thing may have cut it a little short. And that's okay, I understand there's multiple agendas here on the project, but I do think that the song would be even better in my eyes if they leaned more into that guitar part. There's some beautiful production here, soaring production, really. And again, I see why this is such... They were so proud of this song, and it got them to the point of making this EP together. Now, the next song, Problems. This is a completely new song. No one had heard it before this because it was not released as a single. First thing I notice about this song, at the beginning of it, there's a use of crowd noise. Now, if you're an Aerosmith fan, you might know where I'm about to go. If you're not as versed, I'm going to tell you. This reminds me of what Aerosmith did for their version of Train Kept A-Rollin'. Jack Douglas, back in, I guess, 1974, is Get Your Wings. He piped in crowd during Train Kept A-Rollin'. So I just feel like the aura of Aerosmith, because of that, is on this one. Again, prominent guitars from Joe. There's great strings in the production here that really add to the song. Yungblud sounds great. There's a heavier breakdown in the guitar where it gets almost like metal. And I really can tell Joe's contribution during this part. It's a really nice driving riff. Like I said, heavy bass. Towards the end, screaming vocals from Yungblud. Seems like he's trying to do his best Robert Plant, Axl Rose, Steven Tyler over the very heavy riff from Joe. And he sounds good, as I said. I don't have any issue with the tone of his voice, but I think he tries to do a little bit too much, and I wish he gave this song a little bit more room to breathe. It definitely is one of my favorites on the EP. Now, Steven doesn't come in till later on this song, but it is funny because this transition into this song, you can tell he helped write it, and it really enriches the second part of the song. He comes in with a melodic Get Out of Your Head, which is also sung by Yungblud. And you can tell that he lends a little bit more of this part to Steven because Steven's acumen on these types of parts really brings out a lot of the melody. Not that Yungblud can't do that, but it seems like he also just has so much energy, obviously, that he wants to fill every empty space with an ad-lib, a scream, reverb. And that's all great. I don't think it sounds bad. Sometimes it just can be a little crowded. So Steven's transition into this song is really nice. He even does some ad-libs, which we don't see really much at all. Or maybe this is the only spot on the project where he does it at all. There is some pitch correction on his voice again here, but less noticeable than the verses of My Only Angel. And like I said, I think this is just a good song. It has a mix of melody and heaviness. It's a pretty versatile one, considering everything else that's on the EP. Now, the next song is more of a straightforward, I would call it, pop rock song with a bit of a country twist to it. There's a nice heavy bass. On this one, Wild Woman, Yungblud has some pretty cool lyricism. He has one of my favorite lines probably on the whole EP. He says, "Another day, another plane. I guess I'm just a sucker for the fame." Just the way he delivers it is really cool. He uses his voice really well. Although I do think on this one, Steven is a little underutilized. There's a really nice back and forth between he and Yungblud on this one. They exchange a couple of lines, though I do wish, as I mentioned, Steven were more present on the harmonies in the chorus. Nice breakdown here from the drums, which this is really the only point in the entire EP that I can think of that they stand out. The drums are always there, they're always providing a backbone, and they're fine, but they don't really color outside of the lines at all. This is the only portion where I think that they do. And it's cool to see. It adds a little extra dynamic to the song. I just wish it happened more throughout the EP. So now, Joe Perry's solo, again, on this one, it's abridged, which I expected after what I spoke about on Problems. However, his solo here should be louder. It's kind of buried in the mix, and if you're not really listening for it, you're not going to catch it, because it's really only a few bars long. So I wish they made that longer. I also do wish that they used Steven a little bit more on this song. He was used so well, albeit lightly, on Problems. On this next one, Wild Woman, he was used a lot less. He delivered a few phrases in verses, but I can hear so easily, as someone who's listened to all of Aerosmith's material, where his voice would fit right in with harmonies on this. And he does do them a little bit, but overall is pretty muted. Now, the next track is a ballad. I really do think this one was primarily penned by Steven. Just thinking about it, Problems and Yungblud and Wild Woman, are two songs that I think were probably brought to the table by Yungblud, especially Wild Woman, because he had performed this song before it even came out over in Europe on his tour. So I think he had this song and he brought it into the studio for the project, which is fine. Problems, he may have had the skeleton for the song, and then Joe and Steven definitely added songwriting chops, they added structure, they added dynamics to the song. Now, 1,000 Days, I think it's, like I said, penned by Steven. It just seems like a ballad that might fit into Aerosmith's catalog. It's got a really nice lyric that I also enjoy on this one. Someone like you don't belong down on earth with me. This is obviously a love song, and this is where Steven sounds his most natural on the entire project. It's really nice to see, and I think it shows why he's a master, because he doesn't over-sing this one. When Yungblud is singing, again, he sounds good, but on this song specifically, where Steven takes a bit more of a front seat again after 2 songs of Yungblud having been in more control, you can tell that Steven better understands dynamics and where to really let himself loose and where to hold back a little bit. You can feel his emotion in the lyrics. A lot of the emotion on Yungblud is sometimes lost because of all the vocal effects that he uses, but here it's really cool to see Steven contributing in this type of way and how easily he can stand out on a studio track. There's a lot of luscious production too on the verse before the solo. Joe's work on this song reminds me of solos he would do on Get a Grip, which I mentioned in 1993. All those, the big 3 songs where back in the MTV day, they had Alicia Silverstone in the videos, those songs being Crazy, Crying, and Amazing. His solo and work on this song, 1,000 Days, reminds me of some of those songs. He sounds really crisp and clear, and he's playing notes for the sake of the song and not for the sake of just fitting notes into his part of the song, which obviously are 2 different things. And finally, we move to the 2025 mix of Aerosmith's previous hit, Back in the Saddle. The new guitars, I'm gonna say, they actually go pretty damn hard. Now, something I'm upset about, but I also understand, is that there's no present-day Steven on this song. This song, I'm sure, is very strenuous on anyone's voice that sings it because of the high-pitched screaming, and the vocal range that is needed for the song in general. I'm gonna say, Yungblud does not sound bad on this song at all. His ad-libs are cool. I think they add something, they get stuck in my head, and anyone who's mad about, oh, they touched back in the saddle, God forbid, just leave the song alone. Guess what? The 1976 version still exists, and you can go and listen to that until you never want to hear the song again. So really, what is the difference? They wanted to do a remix. They wanted Yungblud to be on it. Matt Sorum did an interview talking about the project. Yungblud is actually the person that hit him up to do drums on this thing. And then the day he was going to the studio, Steven called him. And that's when he realized they were doing this project together. And he asked Steven and Joe if it was cool for them to be remixing Back in the Saddle. And they told him, at least according to Matt Sorum, that they love it. So, you know what? I don't need to hear anything about how it wasn't needed, because you're right, it wasn't needed. This was already a song, and I would have liked a fifth song written by these guys today. But this is what we got. And it's pretty cool. Joe does some interesting things on the guitar. There's some nice distortion on his new parts. And for all of the ad-libs that Yungblud does add, I will say, at the very end of the song, and this is also the end of the EP, so it's really nice to see. It ends with the regular outro, and Steven doing the patented riding high screams, and absolutely no sounds or ad-libs from Yungblud at all. I think that shows you, regardless of Youngblood's constant energy, constant need to be a little bit extra in both his appearance, his singing, and his overall demeanor, he understands the people that he's working with are truly legends, and I think he is grateful for the opportunity to have written with them and recorded with them in a studio. And the fact that the album ends with Steven's original vocals and original screaming, I think just shows Yungblud's appreciation and adoration of what these guys were able to do. So that's basically the EP up and down. If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to do so. Like I said, it's 19 minutes, very easily listenable, multiple times in a row, honestly. Some overall thoughts, the songs are well-written songs. I think they're really well composed, they're tight, they're not longer or shorter than they need to be. Maybe something like My Only Angel, like I said, could have benefited from one less chorus and more work on a bridge. But overall, I think the songwriting is really good. The production is really solid. The fourth songwriter here, who I've neglected to mention, and I'm sorry it took this long, is a already existing Yungblud collaborator. His name is Matt Schwartz. He is someone I did not know about prior to getting the album, and looking at the liner notes, as I mentioned, he is credited along with Steven, Joe, and Yungblud on every single song as having a writing credit. His arranging on this album is great. Obviously, there are some issues that I pointed out where I believe that if Steven had recorded harmonizing vocals, they should have been used more, or Joe's guitar parts should have been more prominently featured. But overall, I think he did a great job. The album sounds really good. The other thing I want to mention, this is more of a side note, less about the music itself, and more about other angles and reasons that this project came to be, and what each member's goal is with it. Now, I don't know how many of you, or if any of you, know that this exists, but each and every one of these songs have been published by a small publishing company through ASCAP, which is the American Songwriters, Creators, and Artists Publication Organization. It stands for something like that. I'm not an expert on that, so don't quote me. But under ASCAP, Steven, and I would assume the other members of Aerosmith, because in my research this has been around a little bit, has a publishing company called Demon of Screamin' Music Publishing. Like I said, the first time I had ever seen that was here in the liner notes of this EP. I was excited to see that because I've always thought Demon of Screamin' is an amazing nickname. So I thought, let me look into this. What is this? Why is it being published over here? Now, according to my minimal research here, please, if anyone knows more or learns more after hearing this, please tell me something, send me something, message me on Instagram, because I don't know enough about this and I would like to know more. But apparently, during the days of crying, so this goes back to 1993, Get a Grip, yet again, there were a lot of collaborators on that song, and they created this publishing company for that song and other songs like it, specifically written by members of Aerosmith, so that those songs and their licensing to other products such as commercials or movies, TV, things like that, their licensing out to those other media could be managed by another company. So what that tells me is Aerosmith, the songs that they were publishing under this separate publishing company were songs that they believed to be successful, that they believed were commercial enough to be featured in other things, and that they believed were going to make them money outside of just appearing on the album and being played by, music enthusiasts around the world. So another song that I had found out was definitely licensed under this publishing company was Jaded. Again, another hit. Really the only major hit off of Aerosmith's Just Push Play. Now, bringing it back to this, all of these songs are being published by that same company. So, all of these songs could have been written with that in mind. Now, like I said, I think these songs are very good, very well composed. I think they're catchy. I think they have a life outside of just this very moment. They're released and they're new. I think they can stand on their own a little bit. However, some of these songs could now be licensed out to other projects in hopes that it gets even bigger. If it appears in a commercial that airs, thousands of times a day across the country, they could be making a lot more money all of a sudden off of something like Wild Woman or My Only Angel. Now Yungblud has the chops and access to say he has some control over a newer version of Back in the Saddle, which already is going to be the promotional song for WWE's most known pay-per-view, the World Wrestling Entertainment, for those that don't know, WrestleMania. This pay-per-view is once a year. It's their most lauded after pay-per-view for superstars of the business and fans alike. The 2025 remix of Back in the Saddle has already been chosen as the song to promote that pay-per-view. So that goes back to exactly what I'm saying. This publishing company was ready to market these songs to other entities and say, hey, we have this music. This could lend itself to this event. This could lend itself to this scene in this movie, or this type of atmosphere, or this commercial. So it's just an interesting angle more than anything. These songs could have other life. Maybe they were written with this other life in mind. And maybe this won't be the last we see of them here on this EP. Maybe they're going to be more prominent than we know. Maybe they'll net Stephen and Joe some more royalties than we really even think here. Just a little bit of news on the charts. I know that the album charted #1 in the UK, which is really pretty awesome. I don't think Aerosmith previously had a #1 in the UK. I think they came close with some of their albums from the 80s, but they did not actually have one. I don't believe it charted #1 in the US. I still believe it was in the top 10, which makes them one of just a few groups to have a top 10 charting project in 6 decades. So, as we've spoken about already, the longevity of this band and these songwriters is quite evident. Before I end this thing, I also want to speak about a digital version of the album that came out around Thanksgiving. So I already had my 2 copies. And Aerosmith, for 36 hours, they released a limited edition digital album with some extra Joe Perry commentary. And I did want to cover that here. Before I go into the actual commentary, I just want to say I think that if you already had a version of this album, which in my case I had 2, obviously one was from Walmart, but the other was directly from Aerosmith's website. So they had a way to track that I already had owned this album. If you already own the album, you should have been able to buy the commentary separately, or maybe even been given the commentary out the gate. This commentary, it's only a mere 3 to 4 minutes. It's nothing extraordinary, though it is nice to hear Joe talk about this and know that he, had energy and true passion for this project that they were doing. He says something funny that Yungblud is like boiling blood, and his energy was just palpable. He was excited to work with them, but they really had no clue where exactly it was going. Yungblud again had told his management and people, I guess, that he wanted to work with Joe. So, like I had mentioned on the other episode, Yungblud went down to Florida. They had met up. They worked together a little bit, but at that point, Joe had to go on his tour with the project. Yungblud had to do his tour. So they kind of separated. And he told Steven about this, Joe did. And he told Steven that they should work with him. So Joe is really the one that facilitated the Toxic Twins being in the studio with Yungblud for this thing. Now, Joe says when they showed these songs to their inner circle, all they were saying was, "Can you please play that again?" And he kind of laughs to himself, saying that in all of his years in the business, he never really heard that. Which, while it might be true, it's coming right from the horse's mouth. It's hard for me to believe when a band has songs that have lasted decades, like Walk This Way, like Sweet Emotion, like Toys in the Attic, like Back in the Saddle, like Janie's Got a Gun. How has no one ever said that before? I find it a little hard to believe, but if that's the truth, that's amazing. I get wanting to hear these things again. Like I said, it's luscious production. It's the combination of a young, hungry, budding artist in Yungblud with 2 very seasoned, very intelligent songwriters in Steven and Joe, along with, obviously, Youngblood's producer, Matt Schwartz, who I don't want to discount here because his contribution adds a lot to the overall sound of the album, absolutely. I know Aerosmith is supposed to be on this thing, but I'm under the impression that Matt Schwartz does the bass. He does a lot of the accompanying guitars. If I'm right, and he does a great job. Okay? So, Joe speaks of this. He also speaks really, really highly of Yungblud. He feels that he's someone who's just on the edge of making it, and like I said, he can feel that hunger, but he also sees the same promise in him to want to get a hold of a live audience and get them off their seats and never sitting back down for the rest of the show. And I've always known Joe to be somebody who loves live performing more than anything. Even with their studio albums, I think he prefers everything to be cut live, all together in the studio at once. You can really tell that these guys wanted to work with this, they chose to work with Yungblud for a reason. And even Joe himself, as I have mentioned, mentions Matt Schwartz, the producer, and how big of a part he does play in the writing process behind the scenes, even though you might not be hearing his name as much in the press. And, he might not appear in the videos and all of that. So it's cool to hear Joe's perspective. He also says that the last time or at least that he can remember when he felt like this, because he says once this kind of got going, they wanted to get it out there quickly. He says he felt that way the second time that Dream On was released. When Dream On was originally released, Aerosmith's first album, their self-titled, it didn't go that far. Dream On wasn't a hit at that point. It wasn't until it was re-released that it became a hit. And he says that they were on the edge of something, and he feels the same way with this project when they were about to release this music. So it's quite interesting to hear him talk about some of this stuff. I wish it were a little longer, and like I said, I wish that everyone who already had a copy of this album had access to this. Or, you know what, post this commentary on YouTube for free. It's 4 minutes. There's no reason it needs to be included in another selling of the digital album for another $8 when I've already spent money on the album twice. And so have many others, I'm sure, because of all the exclusive versions. I know that the limited editions and certain other editions, at least on Aerosmith's website, had sold out because it said so. So it kind of just feels like with this one, they were grabbing for an extra little bit of cash. And for something like this, I don't appreciate that as much as I do love the band. But it was cool to hear this commentary, like I said. Anyway, I just wanted to cover that before ending the episode. For some of you that may have not gotten to hear that version, or some of you that had it and wanted maybe to hear me talk about it, I'm gonna go back to it. I only listened to the commentary a little bit, but I will listen more and maybe pull more from that in the future. But nonetheless, I really do think this is the extent of what I have on this project at this point. I encourage you guys to go listen to it. I encourage you guys to please reach out to me, like I said, in any way, through Instagram, through YouTube comments, anything that you can. Please interact with me. Tell me your opinions on One More Time. I want to hear it so that I can get a gauge of where I am in comparison to everybody else. So let me know, all right? This is Rob Morris signing off for this edition of Get Your Wings. And we'll see you next week. We'll have something out there for you every Thursday. I appreciate you guys listening, and I can't wait for the next one. All right, peace out.